Hello one and all, and welcome to Bellamy Draws. I am Bellamy, and today I will be drawing the Undertaker in the Monochrome to Color Challenge. This is a challenge I've seen floating around a lot on TikTok and a few other social media platforms, so I thought I'd give it a try. In my first attempt at making this video, we ended up with, well, a fondly mundane color palette, so I wanted to go and give it a second try. As you can see on screen, I've begun this drawing like I do all of them, with a very messy sketching phase. Rather than getting the best foundations and a few smooth lines, I've always liked to build the basic form of what I'll be drawing and carve out certain areas. There's no major reason for why I do this, except this is how I've always drawn, and digital makes it easier to transform the image into something nice. Next, I move on into the final line art. Starting with the big messy sketching lines in the first portion of my drawing gives me the option of variation when it comes to what I'll be drawing. There's no single path that I need to try and trace, and simply put, that makes the whole thing less stressful for me. In the final line art phase, I always like to work in blocked out areas. As you can see, I've started with the face outline, but immediately moved into small details like wrinkles, even when there are other things possibly more important. Part of this comes from wanting that instant gratification of seeing how well the final line art can look, because the sketching phase can be a little bit demotivating. I'm unsure why, but there seems to be two camps of artists. Pain and more pain. I'm kidding, but there are a lot of artists like me who can do a good job at transforming a fugly sketch into something smooth. And then there are artists who create the most beautiful guidelines, but that final line art stage is just a bit awkward, which is also me. I move on into shaping the body and clothing. The way I sketch arms is basically just a few circular masses that don't always smoothly flow into the other. This lets me have dips where I can easily let the fabric of the clothes I'm drawing sink in, hang down, and form wrinkles. I've always hated this stage of drawing, but in recent months I've really come to love it. Channels like Draw Like a Sir have really helped me step my game up in this area. You may have noticed in my art that almost all of my line art is the same size with no natural flow or variation. I do this for multiple reasons. One is it is sort of a stylistic choice, similar to what manga artist Junji Ito does. In his lines there is no weight variation except in places he's gone over a second time. Even his cross-hatching has no tail ends, where mine do because I tend to erase that bottom half for more sharpness. This can look bad if you're cutting off the tail end after the fact for every cross-hatch line. Trust me, I know. However, when you use this for wrinkles, you can get an alright looking result. I do it this way rather than with the pressure sensitivity of my brush, because I can never get the brush to actually follow how light or heavy I press down. And with the help of stabilizers, this only serves to give you a small tail end at the front and small at the back, which doesn't really help me when I want lines that smoothly flow into one another. Now you can see my attempt at drawing a hand. I promise I'll get good one day, but today is not that day. I think I understand the basic structure of hands a lot more than I did even a year ago, but for some reason I can never recreate them as I imagine them in my head. After finishing the line art of the body, I move into adding the first and harshest form of shading in my drawings. The heavy black shadows is something you'll typically see in comic books and a few manga, and for me I've always enjoyed how they can make an image pop. Hiroyuki Takai, the writer and artist behind Shaman King, is someone who is very masterful with these large black shadows, with his images ending up looking very shiny and fluid because of them. I try and capture that same energy here. And what you may also notice in my line art is that I always erase the edges of the shadows either above, below, left or right of the line art. This is so the shadow doesn't overtake the entirety of the image, and you can see the exact spots where one object becomes another. Right now I focus on following the wrinkles I drew earlier. One thing as of late I've also moved towards doing is adding a circle like you've seen in the hat and on the shoulder. This is pretty much the direct point where light hits the image. I've seen a lot of old school comic artists like Jim Lee do something similar in their past works. Now I fill in these final areas because I know sometimes it's easier to fill first and erase later. You may have noticed in this drawing I'm erasing both the black that's near the edges of the sides regardless of where direct light is hitting. This allows me to create a more reflective looking material, and as the Undertaker wears leather, I thought it would be a good fit. I decided on drawing the Undertaker because he was a longtime hero for me in the wrestling world when I was a kid. Something about seeing his mystique and his promos and wrestling style really made a kid like me believe and live in the moment. And that's because his dedication to his craft is simply unreal. This is a guy who would have succeeded in anything he put his mind to, and thankfully for the world of professional wrestling, that was where his passion lied. Growing up in a low-income household, things like the monthly WWE pay-per-views that were out of the question, yet my parents still let me get WrestleMania 25, and I'll never forget that match of Undertaker vs. HBK. Now I move on into the coloring phase, where we get to the bulk of this challenge. I got my color palette from colorblind.io. First I switched my screen filter from normal to grayscale, so I wouldn't know any of the colors I was using. I started laying out the base colors. After getting through the base, I add shadows that would fit if I kept the whole artwork in grayscale. You'll see a lot of crossover between the heavy black shadows I add and these new lighter shadows. That's a big reason why I turn off one layer when moving to the other. I don't want them to overlap and make me second guess my coloring choices. And seeing as I have a pretty consistent shading style, I'm not too worried about the shadows completely contradicting each other. I do the final touches in the hands, which gave me a little trouble, because there was an open line somewhere and Krita's paint bucket tool can be a bit finicky. I overlay the black shadows to see how it looks, then I add a gradient with the airbrush, because this can add a little more variation to the art without breaking the color palette. Now it's time for the main event. And it turns out we got some blue, orange, purple. It kind of reminds me of the color scheme of Meat Canyon's Monster Lab. But overall, I'm happy with this image. What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. This is Bellamy, wishing you a fantastic day.